So everything gets started because our main character is told he's a lousy painter, but if he goes and expands his education, he might realize his potential. And in doing so, he stumbles onto a plot to enslave the people of his world and then acts to save lives and freedom. He then goes on to save a diverse and multi-ethnic civilization. Huh. Kind of a contrast from the other lousy painter whose shit everyone was dealing with in the 1930s and 40s, isn't it? Hello, my name is Garvin, and I read things and natter on about them on the internet for your entertainment. Today, we're looking at I Remember Lemuria, the first work by Richard Shaver and Ray Palmer in what would become known as the Shaver Mysteries. This story was published in Amazing Stories magazine in 1945, kickstarting a 5-year battle between the science fiction fandom and the believers in the Shaver Mystery. With all that said, let's turn to on the story itself, shall we? The story is told to us through first-person narration via our protagonist, Mutan Mion, and it begins with his painting teacher telling him that his work is awful. Like, the guy literally just looks at his painting and just breaks out laughing. That's harsh. His teacher does take some pity and tells him, hey, head out to Tian City. It's a bigger city that's deeper underground. All the cities are built underground in this setting. Once he's there, he should study science and grow. This is meant quite literally, as in this story, people keep growing throughout their entire lives, with the elders of humanity hitting heights in the hundreds of feet. Mutan is able to get to Tian City via elevator, and he's able to sign up for school courses with a single video call. Man, wish my college experience had been that easy. Not everything is quite that easy, though. One of Mutan's friends is an elevator operator, and he tells Mutan that Tian City stinks of fear. That's meant quite literally, as his friend is what the story calls a veriform, a person who has animal features, a hybrid. There are a number of characters like this throughout the story, and everyone is treated equally. There are no signs of racism or social conflict between veriforms and what I'm just going to call base humans, and I really enjoy that. Now, to be fair, even within base form humanity, there's variation, as Mutan himself was created in a vat. He was not born, he was decanted, and then adopted by two people who raised him as his parents. Now, the veriforms were created when the scientists of this civilization figured out how to create hybrids through the use of, and I quote, mutating rays. As an aside, it's interesting how early science fiction technology tends to be ray-based. The technology of Edgar Burroughs' Barsoom, for example, also revolved around the discovery and use of various rays. But let me get back to the story. Mutan, within a day, also picks up on this undercurrent of fear in the city, and he finds it strange. This is a place of prosperity and plenty. There's nothing but peace. No one is allowed to be unsheltered or hungry. All manner of luxuries are available for the asking, and there is no sign of any danger. And yet, so many of the citizens of Teen City are uneasy and even act as if they are being hunted. It's at this point that Mutan runs into a young lady named Arl. She has rosy purple skin. Listen, that's how the story describes it. Legs that end in cloven hooves, and a deer-like furry tail that Mutan is utterly entranced by. After just one talk with her, he decides he's going to switch over his major to medical and science studies, which strangely just happens to be what she's studying. And he also does this incredibly easily. His college experience is so much less stressful than mine, and I'm almost mad about it. Sorry, back to the story. It's a good thing he does switch majors, though, because his new teacher is the one who clues him into what's going on in this city. You see, people are disappearing, and anyone that mentions the fact that people are disappearing and that something might be wrong, becomes one of the disappeared. We also get a science lesson that's relevant to the plot. You see, in this universe, we're told that suns actually come from planets that held life, and during the course of that, created massive cold deposits while they were orbiting a star. When their parent star dies, they of course become cold and lifeless, and are covered by dead things and more coal, until struck by a meteorite or an asteroid or something, and then they catch on fire, becoming a star. When the stars are young, they release clean solar energy, and that promotes life and growth and health. But over time, they start burning radioactive and poisonous elements that are located in their crust. For example, uranium. This makes the sunlight poisonous and causes people to grow old and die. Under clean sunlight, people never age, but stay relatively young and keep growing to ridiculous heights. So, Mutan's people who colonize this world, which is Earth, from space, evacuate worlds when their suns turn poisonous. However, this world's sun is becoming more poisonous every year, and the evacuation should have been done by now, and people are starting to wonder why it hasn't been ordered at all. So, let me be honest, I feel the background science of Shaver's universe is something that really would fill up its own video, because if I go into everything, this video will be over an hour long, combining all of this stuff together. So, the sunburning thing is all I'm really going to mention here. But I do want to note that I have been told that the idea of a sun being a burning planet was considered as a possible theory by scientists many years back, like pre-Civil War back. And this was when we didn't understand the role of hydrogen in the workings of the sun, or how fusion really worked. So let's keep in mind this story is 80 years old and was written by men born at the dawn of the 20th century. And let's just keep moving, all right? Thank you. Once again, back to the story. After this class, Arl takes Mutan to what's basically a dance club. There, people are stimulated through the use of spores and electromagnetic fields to feel great, relaxed, and like dancing. I have to admit, I'm a bit queasy with just how relaxed the society is towards openly manipulating, and in some case, outright controlling people's thoughts and emotions. I know someone's going to bring up the booze in our dance clubs. Here's the thing, though. You go to a dance club, you can choose not to have a drink. Anyone who walks into this dance club is getting hit by these electromagnetic fields and doused by spores. To me, this is really creepy and dangerous. But I'll get back to that. The dance party is broken up when one of the partiers is murdered in front of everyone's eyes by a remote ray. Some of the partygoers share their suspicions that someone has subverted the government because no cops showed up to deal with this murder, and these people probably mean to only move themselves and their loyal followers to the new world, killing everyone else. This helps establish the motive of our bad guys fairly handily, so good job there, Mr. Shaver. The next day, when they arrive to class and find their teacher missing, Mutan decides that's the last straw and he takes action. He rallies up his classmates and leads them out of the city under the cover of taking a picnic on the surface forest, and then suggests, hey, let's rent a spaceship for a pleasure cruise by going into orbit. Once they're on that ship, they hijack it to flee to a deep space holding of an allied race called the Nortans, they're basically Nordic aliens. I'm not going to get into that. That's its own video. If you'd like to see that, mention that in the comments. After explaining the situation to the lady in charge, named Princess Vanu, who, by the way, is 80 feet tall, and like all elders, apparently even getting into close proximity to her causes you to become her loyal minion unto death, and If you are of the opposite gender, you will fall hopelessly in love with her. I imagine the same is true in reverse for male elders and the ladies. I have no idea how this would impact people attracted to their own gender or non binary people. The story doesn't say, but I imagine they don't get to walk away either. Arl is, of course, less than thrilled by the idea of Mutan falling hopelessly in love with an 80-foot tall blonde alien, but the alternative is to let her homeworld die, and she's not willing to do that. So she guts through it. They ask for the princess's aid, and the princess decides to go to the main Norton government to convince the other elders to gather the Norton fleet and free the people of Earth. So apologies, but I gotta pause for just a minute because in this story, the whole government setup in its organization seems to be based on mental control and compulsion. For example, the cities have machines that mentally push, or row, as they call it in the story, the city's citizens into behaviors and into doing work, and the elders can compel loyalty from younger people through just their physical presence and make younger people desperate to serve them even at great cost. It's basically warping people's minds and not giving them the option to dissent. And while this is on the extreme end, I find this a lot in earlier science fiction, the idea of machines or powers that change people's emotions and minds without giving them any options. And I really loathe that. I really just think it's vile to directly control what people can feel and think. Yes, influencing people's emotions and thoughts happens. It's part of being a social species, but the right to our own thoughts is really one of the last absolute freedoms we have. And stories like this just seem so eager to throw that away and call it a good thing. I am mystified and terrified. I'm sorry I keep using the word terrified, but I don't have a better word to describe how I feel about this. Thank you for letting me climb onto my soapbox. Once again, I will get back to the story. The Nortans agree to liberate the people of Earth, but the first attack is held off by the conspiracy threatening to kill everyone on Earth unless the fleet backs off. Feeling that if everyone is murdered, that defeats the point of liberation, the Nortans back off, but they don't give up. They decide to use stealth instead. The princess uses a technological procedure to lessen her effect on Mutan, getting him back to the point where he can be in love with Arl, and she does this to the other men who came with him, and then she augments them so that they can serve as secret agents. Mutan is sent back to Earth and sneaks back home, briefly meeting with his adopted parents, who have no idea that there's even a war going on. No one does, because this is being hidden from them. Mutan then infiltrates the command center and turns off the planetary defenses so that the Norton army can land. And it's here we finally meet the Darrows, the evil foot soldiers of this story. Mutan civilization exiles its worst criminals, and the story really sets this up as a big mistake, because this is where our villains come from. You see, there are abandoned cities with a lot of left-behind technology and resources that just weren't the effort of moving out. And the exiles gathered in those abandoned cities, scavenged that technology, and used it to build up their numbers, creating a race of savage dwarves who just hate everybody. The Duros weren't monitored by the people who threw them out either, and that's another mistake that the people of this world pay for. Because when an elder was found abusing his power, instead of being executed or imprisoned, he was also exiled. And due to the fact that he's an elder and he can compel loyalty through just his presence, he found it really easy to just track down Darrows and subjugate them, turning them into his little private army. And he used them to find people in Mutan civilization that he could subvert or bribe or intimidate into working with him, and use this to create a secret coup that displaced the original government and put him back into power, only this time over the whole planet. And the Duro's reward, well, he let them kidnap anyone they wanted, and then they would proceed to torture, mostly kill, and then almost always eat their victims.
Eating people alive? Where does that get from?
So while the Duros make excellent reavers, they don't make good stand-up soldiers because they crumple when they're faced with people who know they're there and can shoot back. So the armies of the Norton are able to break through them, corner the evil elder, and then shatter his fortress, defeating him within days. And with that, they start the evacuation of Earth. But there is another problem, because nothing can ever go smooth. Some of the Duros escaped. Worse, there's a population of innocent wild men living beyond civilization. Some of these are people who were traumatized by recent events or realized what was going on and just fled into the wilderness. Others are people who left for various reasons, or the descendants of people who left. Either way, when Mutan tries to track them down to explain to them, hey, everything's okay, but we really need to leave this planet because it's bad for you now, they flee at the sight of him, so he can't round them up. But he does want to help them, so Mutan writes on a metal that doesn't rust or decay a book explaining how humans can filter out the poisons of the sun, because it does get into the water, the food, and the air as well, and learn to extend their lives, and perhaps one day reach true human adulthood, at least until their technology is advanced enough to just leave. And that's where this story closes. Now, weird ideas about the origin of the sun aside, there are some ideas here that are ahead of their time. And you see some almost transhumanist elements here. The Veriforms are basically genetically engineered people. They're what we would call genetic chimeras in some cases, or true hybrids. And there is no legal or social difference between them and more baseline citizens. Our main character is a test tube baby who was grown in a vat and adopted by a couple who focused on socializing and educating him from childhood, and did a really good job. There are some elements that alarm me as well. The absolute rule of the elders, backed up by their automatic brainwashing. This idea of an elite where if you end up in their presence, you have no choice but to fall hopelessly in love with them. Again, that's terrifying. I mean, in this story, we see just one elder, one guy with evil intentions, subvert and conquer an entire planet, and no one would have noticed if it hadn't been for the fact that he didn't keep a tight hand on the Duros. Combine this with using machines to subvert and control people's actions and thoughts, and that's considered basic civil governing. It's just terrifying all the way down here for me. I also find it interesting that there's this subversion of what is usually presented as good and wholesome in fantasy stories. Here, it's the people who hide out in the dark places beyond the reach of the sun who are the greatest and shiniest good. And it's those who spend too much time in the sunlight that are evil and twisted and base. The sun itself is made into a corrupting, poisonous influence on your health, your mind, and your soul. And in the story, it's strongly suggested that mature, sane civilizations avoid getting too close to suns or stars so that they can avoid any possibility of such corruption. This is a complete reversal of what we usually see in stories, and I have to admit, that kind of hooked my interest a bit. On that note, that's where our video ends this week. I hope you found this video informative or at least entertaining. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, or consider subscribing. All of those help me in my eternal battle against the Dread Lord algorithm. Terror be on his name. Speaking of help, I'd like to thank Big Steve, who, with luck, may reach elder size himself someday. He's closer than most of us. If you would like to join my Everwise patrons for as little as $1 a month and vote on upcoming videos, there's a link in the description. Next week, we look at some more recent science fiction with the official history of the Vorlons of Babylon 5. I hope you'll join me, but until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.